You're listening to Atlanta Baseball Talk, your weekly podcast for all things Atlanta Braves.
Welcome to show number 271. Today is Sunday, July 20th. My name is Kurt. No Ham or Steve today, so I am calling in someone to fill their big shoes. I'll be catching up with him momentarily. Tonight's show, of course, will really be talking all about the big Uggla news that went down first and foremost. Lots of conversation about this and when it might happen, and sadly for all of us, Ham was the one who nailed it. He was the one that said it would happen right around the All-Star break. So to cover all this, I'm happy to be joined by Kevin McAlpin, the Braves beat reporter for 680 The Fan and part of the Braves radio network. So, Kevin, thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's funny because we wanted to have you come on and talk about really a lot about Uggla and kind of where that situation stood, and then all that got resolved, as all these things tend to kind of do. We set up shows and have topics, and then guys break out of funks or something like that, and they kind of change their plans. But we still want to talk some about the Uggla situation. He obviously gets suspended before he gets released. And do you know, with that Saturday in Chicago, is that the first time that he's been late to the ballpark?
You know, to my knowledge, it is. And, Dan's one of those guys that he's one of the first guys in the clubhouse in the morning, in the afternoon. He's one of the last guys there at the end of the day. So that's the first to my knowledge. I'm around these guys home and road, and I can't remember ever seeing another instance where he was either late to report or showed up, an hour before game time, or any of the things that were being reported. I can't ever remember seeing that happen. So to my knowledge, that's the first time that type of instance has occurred with Dan.
And is there any backstory to that? It was just one of those things. He got tied up or something, or do we not even know?
Yeah, you know what? When we talked to Freddie Gonzalez on Sunday, he basically, didn't want to air out too much of the dirty laundry. He basically put it that, this is something that we handled internally. We've moved on from it. And, he didn't really want to get into any more specifics other than that. So, I don't know that there was, a whole lot more to the story, but like I said, the manager didn't seem like he was in any hurry to try to talk about that last Sunday in Chicago.
Yeah. And we talked a little, and I don't know how feasible it ever would have been, because obviously he had to give the approval. But did you know that if they ever talked to him about maybe going down to AAA to work on his swing, just so he wouldn't be sitting there not playing,
I know a lot of fans have asked about that. Why didn't they make that decision to send him down to AAA to try to work some things out? It's a little more complicated, obviously, with a player of Dan's stature. He would obviously have to agree to that as well. So, it would have been more than them just going and asking him, hey, we'd like you to go and work it out. I think when you look at the last couple of years, the Braves gave him every chance here at the major league level to work his way through these struggles, and unfortunately, it just didn't happen for him. So, I know a lot of people, a lot of fans were wondering, hey, why aren't they sending him down, work some things out? Unfortunately, it wasn't quite that easy, and the sense I got was that even if the Braves had went to him and asked him to take that assignment, I don't know that he would have necessarily been very eager to even make that a consideration.
And why is that? Just, my thinking, and when we were, banning about that idea, I was thinking if he goes to AAA and he can't hit in AAA, it really kind of seals the deal in his career. Whereas if he stays here, it seems like a team maybe takes a shot at him because they still think that he has a potential change of scenery, whatever it might be. But if he goes to AAA and proves that he can't hit the baseball anymore, it's pretty much done for him.
Yeah, again, I think when you look at his contract, being under contract for this year and then for next year as well, and the money and the financial aspect of that that's involved, I don't know that he was really considering the long-term future. I know that, he feels like he still has a lot left in the tank, and that was pretty much the consensus of guys in the clubhouse when they found out the news that Dan had been released. They feel like that he's going to end up somewhere, and he's going to be a productive member of whatever team, decides to take a flyer on him. So again, I think, there's some egos involved, obviously, at this level, and for a guy to say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to go down to AAA and try to work it out. I think he saw a lot of different things going on. I think he looked at Tommy La Stella and the way he's been performing here, which has been outstanding. I mean, what a find he's been to call him up and give him a chance to play every day. So, I think that in the end, I think when all is said and done, I do believe a change of scenery will do Dan Uggla good, a new opportunity, a fresh start somewhere, probably exactly what he needs after a couple of tough years.
And you mentioned the guys in the clubhouse, and I saw a couple of interviews, and I think you might have been at the forefront. Seems like I saw your mic tag there right in front with Hayward, with Freeman, talking about how much they love Dan Uggla as a teammate, as a person, his professionalism. Are there any concerns that this might have some sort of lingering effect on the team, or are they're so business-like that they just approach this and say it's tough and we appreciate that, but we just have to keep going forward, and what they both said Uggla insisted that they do?
Yeah, it's a business, obviously. When you're around this game long enough, you're going to see situations like this pop up. I think this was probably the first one that guys like Freeman and Jason had been around, where it was really one of those spots where this is a business now. We can see what types of decisions have to be made in a situation like this. So I don't think there'll be any carryover, any lingering effects. I think, if anything, it might be a wake-up call to the clubhouse to say, you know what, if you're not performing, we're going to go in a different direction. And, you've seen a guy that was owed almost $19 million for this year and next year, and we've flat out released him. So, I don't know that anybody else's job is on the hot seat, so to speak, but I think it's a message to the guys that, you know what, they take performance very seriously. And, again, unfortunately, it wasn't happening for Dan, but I don't think there'll be any kind of carryover or any type of ill will around the clubhouse. Again, it's a business, and these guys certainly understand that from a very, very young age.
Well, and speaking to that, I don't want to just assign Dan this payroll number, because I don't think that's fair to him. Obviously, he's owed the money, but looking at this as a fan, there's kind of two ways to look at this. One, maybe you're worried that you're stuck with all this money that's owed to this particular player, and that maybe the team is handcuffed on moves that they want to make this year, next year. Or is it that ownership, after they handed out all these big contracts, that they're even more committed to winning, and they need this spot, and so they're willing to eat the rest of his contract so that they can be a more productive team? I mean, do you get any sense of how this is going to impact payroll and things of that nature?
No, I don't know. I mean, I think when they look at the payroll side of things, the money is spent. They've committed it whether he's here or not. I think the decision really came down to the fact that, they wanted to give Freddie Gonzalez another option, a deeper bench. This is a team that, you can say what you want about, how Dan was performing, but essentially they were playing basically with a man short. They were playing with a 24-man roster. And I think when Frank Wren looked at the timing of the move, they're in first place, they're heading towards the stretch run. He wants to give Freddie Gonzalez the best possible team and the best chance to win. So I think that was the biggest reason that they pulled the trigger right now. They wanted to give him an extra player off the bench and to not, so to speak, play with a short roster as they come down the stretch here. It's going to be a tough second half. A lot of teams in the month of April above 500. So I think, it all just comes down to putting the very best possible 25-man roster together. And they felt like, moving forward, that Dan did not fit into those plans here for the rest of the season.
So they bring Gosselin up for the suspension game, and then they bring Pasternicki back. Is there a reason why Gosselin didn't get brought back, or why Pasternicki wasn't brought up for the suspension game? Do we know why either of those?
Well, I'll tell you, with Gosselin, he's been really swinging the bat well with AAA Gwinnett this year. He's hitting right around 350, I believe. His offensive game has really taken the next level. He went back down on Monday after the one-day suspension to Dan Uggla. Now, the move was made on Friday to release Uggla, and they needed to make a roster move. Unfortunately, Gosselin wasn't back with AAA for that 10-day window. You need to stay down there for 10 days until you get called back up, unless there's an emergency situation. So they felt like Pasternicki is a similar player. Obviously, they know what Tyler can do from a versatility standpoint. So that's the reason it was Tyler and not Phil Gosselin this time around. That being said, in the long term, I do think Gosselin will be back up here sooner rather than later.
And they also send Luis Avilan, who's struggled a lot this year, especially recently. They send him down to bring up Chasen Shreve from AA. I'm hoping I'm saying his name right, has been really lighting it up down there. But obviously they still need a lefty in the bullpen. They still need some bench help, as you mentioned. Any sense there's something bigger coming than just those two moves?
I don't think so. I know a lot of fans are keeping their fingers crossed that a blockbuster happens with a guy like David Price. I just don't see it happening for a guy like that. The Rays are going to, demand a lot of top prospects and, some guys that are major league ready for a return on a guy like David Price. So I don't think anything major is in the works. I do think a lefty reliever, a veteran, something similar to what they did last year with a guy like Scott Downs. They brought him in for the stretch run. He was a nice addition to that Braves bullpen. So I think a veteran lefty in the pen and maybe a bat off the bench, but I don't see any type of blockbuster deals. This is a team, you'll remember, that their payroll has been right around the low $90 million mark for the better part of the last 12 or 13 years. This year, obviously, at the end of spring training, they brought in Irvin Santana. That kicked that number up to, around $110 million this season. So they don't have a whole lot of financial flexibility, but in the past, we've seen this team and we've seen Frank Wren be creative with moves. And I do think it'll be more of a creative type move for a veteran lefty and maybe a bat off the bench. But as far as anything major that will knock anybody's socks off, I just don't see that happening this season.
And nothing to this Peter Gammons tweet from earlier this week about the Braves willing to move BJ at any cost?
I have not gotten that sense from anybody that I've talked to. No, I mean, I don't know where it comes from. Obviously, Peter's a very well-known, well-respected journalist, and if he said it, obviously he's gotten that from a great source. But I have not gotten any rumblings that BJ would be on the move. The timing was really odd with that. When you look at what he's done here the last couple of weeks since going to that leadoff spot, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to be coming out now. That's something that you would have expected a few weeks ago or last month or even in the off season. But, the timing just really caught me off guard. But, from the things I've gathered, I don't know that there's any type of sense that they're willing to dump in this early into this, a long-term contract they signed him for last year.
Right. So all the people clamoring for the Matt Kemp for BJ Upton trade, they should hold their breath on that one.
Yeah, I don't know that you should go out and pre-order your Kemp jerseys anytime soon. I just don't think that's going to happen. And again, look, Matt Kemp was a nice ball player. He's had some injuries here the last few years, and I don't know that he's necessarily the long-term solution either. So again, from the people that I've talked to and the things I've gathered, I don't think that anything is in the works to move BJ Upton, especially this early into such a long contract.
So last question, and then we'll do a quick lightning round. But obviously the Braves have kind of been up and down this year. They have the 9-game winning streak, then they go on the 4-game losing streak. The Braves have always been very businesslike, and sometimes I think to the detriment of the team. But have you seen any frustration that's kind of popped up when they're going through these streaks? Or I know Freddie's very much a Bobby Cox disciple, where it's just very day to day, keep even keeled. Is that still apparent with this current 2014 Braves team, that they just approach every single day as just another day?
There's no doubt about it. This is a very, very even-keeled clubhouse. They've got a nice mix of young guys that are young by age, but by experience. They've gotten a good experience here at the major league level in a short period of time. This is an organization that's used to winning, used to being a contender year in and year out. And you'll see a stretch where they win 9 in a row, and they're not running around. They're not getting ahead of themselves. They're not, talking about the World Series. You'll see them lose 7 in a row, and it's, we know what this team's capable of. We know offensively we can put it together, and they've certainly shown some really good, streaks of that throughout the course of the season. So I think this has been a very even-field clubhouse. Don't get too high, don't get too low. And I think that's extremely important. That's what you need. You don't want to, get to a point where you lose 7 or 8 in a row and you're calling people out or you're pointing fingers or asking questions. That's just not what this team does. And again, the same can be said for when they're winning and they're going out there and having success. They're not getting ahead of themselves. They know that they've got quite a fight in store here in the second half. The Nationals aren't going anywhere. They're not going to run and hide. So this is, it's basically a one-day-at-a-time approach, and I think that's exactly what it takes.
All right, quick lightning round with you. BJ Upton stays in the one hole the remainder of the season.
I will say yes. I think that the productivity we've seen from him, Jason Hayward did a nice job as well. But for a team that doesn't have a true leadoff man, I would say that BJ probably is the best fit for this club going forward.
Over under Mike Minor's ERA in the second half, 4.
I'm going to go under. I think he's really worked some things out. I think there's a couple of things we've seen in his last couple of starts, the way he's counted the strike zone. I'm going to go under. I think he works it out and has a big second half.
Irving Santana ERA in the second half, 3.5.
Ooh, that's about where I'd put it. That sounds pretty good to me. Can I go with the push? Is that doable?
We'll take a push. We call that kicking up the line there. Chris Johnson's batting average in the second half, 270.
Boy, he's on a tear right now. His last 30-some-odd games, he's hitting 335. I will say over. I think he finishes this thing strong. He's looking pretty dialed in at the plate, so I'm going to take the over.
Gaddis hits 12 homers in the second half.
How many games are left? 64, 63? Yeah, I'll say over. I think after he's back, he's healthy again. He's swinging the bat well, so I'll take the over. I'll say he has a big second half.
All the optimism. I love it. Of these three players, who's still on the 25-man roster after the trade deadline? We put Avalon in here, but I replaced him with David Hale because he's just so good. It seems like that somebody maybe want to take him off or make a pitch for him with the Braves. Hale, Carpenter, Schaefer. Of those, who's still on the 25-man roster after the trade deadline?
I think all of them. Again, I think it goes back to the fact that I don't know if there's any major moves in store, so I think all three of those guys, and I would add Avalon as well. I think we'll see him before too long. He had a scoreless inning on Saturday night, so I think he'll work some things out, and the Braves will certainly give him another opportunity here. So I'll say all three of those guys, and I'll add Avalon in as well.
And you did so well with this last year. How many wins will the Braves have at the end of the season?
I nailed it right on the head last year in spring training, not to pat myself on the back. I said 96, if memory recalls, in the middle of March. I'm going to say 94. They're a couple games off their pace from last year, so I'll say 94.
And they win the East with 94?
I mean, it's not going to be easy, but yes, I do think 94 should get them a National League East title and get them back in the postseason again.
All right, we have you on record. Kevin, thanks so much with your time. We really appreciate it. I know you got pushed back by the rain delay today, and thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Yeah, we'll catch up with you soon. So listen to Kevin every day on 680 The Fan and 680thefan.com, and of course follow him on Twitter at Kevin McAlpin, McAlpin, Kevin McAlpin. And keep up with all his Brave news. And it's so funny, we don't really do the personal stuff on the show anymore, but I looked back to see when he was on our last show, and I listened to the intro, and last year when he was on our show, it was my son's birthday, and amazingly, we have him on again 1 year, almost to the day later. It is my son's birthday again today. So moving on to the Shot in the Dark, everybody's favorite section of the show now. Looking back at last week, Ham and I both whiffed as we went with all-star picks, mine being Kimbrel would get the save, Ham's that Freeman would hit a homer. Both played well, but neither really did much of anything that stood out. And, of course, the National League lost anyway, so no chance for a save there. Steve predicted that the bullpen would give up no runs, and he was right up until the second game of the series with the Phillies, when the combined in games 2 and 3, Simmons and Carpenter combined to give up 3 runs, including of course, the big game-losing 2-run homer that Simmons gave up to Jimmy Rollins in Game 2 on Saturday. So no winners amongst us this week. With that, I'm still winning the month with a scorching 1, and Ham and Steve remain shut out for July. Checking in our listener shot in the darks, which were very much on par with our predictions. Ice_619, these are all from Twitter, predicted that Tehran would get the win in the All-Star game. Of course, he actually did not even pitch. At Meg Lepore said Freddie would win the All-Star game MVP, and of course we know that didn't happen as it went to Mike Trout on the winning American League team. I'm surprised they didn't just give it to Jeter and name it the Derek Jeter all-time greatest player in the history of mankind award right then and there. And at Wesley Stout predicted that Dan Uggla would hit a home run, and sadly we all know how that happened. He is maybe hitting wiffle ball home runs in his backyard right now. So from Facebook, Corey Carroll ironically tried to throw a reverse jinx on Freddie Freeman. Lots of Freddie love this week by predicting that he would go 1-13 with 5 Ks against the Phils. And he ended up going 1-11 with 2 Ks, so really just a jinx, not a reverse jinx, and as a result, a winner. So congrats to Corey, I think. So it continues. Please submit your shots in the dark before first pitch on Monday, and we will pick our favorite ones, track them this week, and of course discuss them again next week and let you know who won. So submit those over on Twitter using the hashtag ABTSITD for Atlanta Baseball Talk Shot in the Dark, or on Facebook, and we will go from there. So for this week, Steve is back with his hope meter at 1,000 and has the Braves in first and up by 4 on the Nats by week's end. Ham sticks with his Freddie Freeman love and has him hitting 300 with 2 homers. And I am going back to the Chris Johnson well. He is on a tear right now, as Kevin mentioned. So I'm going 324 doubles, 1 homer, which would be a massive week. But he's looking pretty awesome at the plate right now. Looking at the week ahead, there are 2 4-game series coming up, all at home, 4 with the Marlins and then 4 with the Padres. But for sake of the show, we'll only be picking the first 7 of these games. So Ham and Steve are calling 5 in 2 weeks, and I'm going 4 and 3. A couple of tough starters from the Marlins, and of course we can never seem to beat the Padres anymore these days. So that's the show. Thanks for listening. As always, please subscribe to our new YouTube channel, as well as following us on iTunes and Stitcher to keep up with all the current weekly shows. You can check in with us at AtlantaBaseballTalk.com, as always, to check out past shows, read our great blogs, and post in our comments section. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, which is ATL Baseball Talk, and, of course, like us on our new Facebook page. So thanks to Kevin McAlpin, and thanks, as always, for you guys listening, and, as always, as Steve says, go Braves.
Thanks for listening to Atlanta Baseball Talk, your weekly podcast for all things Atlanta Braves. To find new shows, to post in our forum, or to send a comment, please visit us at AtlantaBaseballTalk.com.
Had to admit the